The One Piece manga officially returns in just a couple of days, and for the past month, I've been combing through the last 200 or so chapters of One Piece in order to compile a chronological retelling of the events of the Reverie all the way through the current happenings of the Egghead arc. A lot of the story over the past few years has been told out of explicit order, especially with the last few chapters being flashbacks at things that we would have seen around the Reverie arc. And while this was quite the task, I think it's very rewarding to look at the story from a macro perspective, rather than just the week-to-week window we often find ourselves in. My hope with this video is to give a bit of a refresher before we head back into the Egghead arc, as well as point out some interesting insights that taking this bird's eye view of the series allows. So I've created a table of contents of sorts, with timestamps for various parts of this video. You'll notice this recap doesn't start immediately with the Reverie itself, and that's for good reason. Across the Zou and Whole Cake Island arcs, we actually get a build-up to the Reverie by revisiting several characters who would go on to take part in it, through various cover stories and quick asides in various chapters. Also, the newspaper is a crucial part of the One Piece story, both for us as readers and the characters in the story as well, and this gives us a lot of context for when certain events are happening. When compiling this timeline, I've been following a rule of thumb. The newspaper is printed as soon as possible and distributed by the next day when possible. I felt this was appropriate, as we've seen several times throughout the series characters reading about a given event the next morning. Also, considering time to travel is tricky in the series, I think we can somewhat consistently say that travel by air is a lot faster than travel by sea, and this explains how the news crews can distribute information at such a rapid rate across an ocean. And real quick, I just want to say thank you again for the support with this channel over the past few weeks. The live action breakdown is going strong. We've hit over 3,000 views for that video, and that's way beyond anything in my imagination. And we've hit over 50 subscribers. I'm looking forward to breaking down chapter 1087 once it drops in a few days, and I really appreciate all the support you guys have been showing. Now, let's get into it. So, about 3 months prior to the story in the present day, the Vegapunk satellite York informs the 5 elders that Vegapunk has been studying the Void Century. After a while, the world government starts sending agents to the island to investigate. CP5 was sent and didn't find anything, but they didn't return. CP7 was sent to investigate this, and they also didn't return, and then same with CP8. Over the last 2 months, York has been capturing these agents in order to increase the tensions between Vegapunk and the world government, and to cast more suspicion upon the scientist. Of course, this was all part of her plan to become a celestial dragon herself. Somewhere in the middle of this 2 to 3 month period that York has been plotting against Vegapunk, the Straw Hat Pirates free Dressrosa from the Doflamingo family's rule. A newspaper is printed detailing the defeat of Doflamingo at Luffy's hand, which prompts Jack to stop his invasion of Zou and head for Dressrosa. Around this time, various people throughout the world read of the Straw Hats' feats at Dressrosa, including Vivi and Kairu at Alabasta, Dalton and Koreha in Soccer Kingdom, but also several members of the Worst Generation, as well as Smoker and Tashigi on their way to Egghead to seek treatment from Vegapunk for the abducted kids from Punk Hazard. The Straw Hat Pirates acquire their new Grand Fleet and prepare to head for Zou with Bartolomeo's help. Meanwhile, Lucci and his band of CP0 agents have come to Dressrosa in order to cover up Doflamingo's mess, only to find that the Revolutionary Army has gotten to it first, having taken the list of smugglers and the loads of military weapons. Back on Baltigo, Dragon notes that the fall of Doflamingo has allowed rebel forces around the world to gain the upper hand from their monarchs, and he calls for a meeting of the Revolutionary Army leaders. Unbeknownst to him, a heavily injured Jesus Burgess had snuck away onto the bilge of the Revolutionary Army ship in Dressrosa, and made his way all the way to Baltigo. He calls Shiryu and Lafitte, who had gone to Dressrosa, to pick up Burgess, and informs them of the Revolutionary Army's hideout, telling them that the Blackbeard pirates could come up on a lot of weapons should they attack Baltigo. Meanwhile, Fujitora along with Sengoku and Suru escort Doflamingo to Impel Down, but Jack intercepts them and sinks 2 of their ships, only to end up defeated and thought dead in the newspaper. The events of Zou happen with the Straw Hats and the Minks, and while this is going on, we see various royals across the world prepare for the Reverie. Cobra, Vivi, and Karu leave with Chaka, Pel, and Igaram from Alabasta with the protection of Hina. Dalton and Koreha prepare to leave from the Sakura Kingdom. Elizabello of Providence rejects a marine escort and offers to travel together with the Dressrosa royals of Riku, Viola, and Scarlet, as well as Mancherry. Wapol also prepares to leave from the evil Black Drum Kingdom, and we get a glimpse of the Kano Kingdom, where the Emperor awaits Donsai to return from Dressrosa, so they can head for the Reverie as well. The royals of Fishman Island prepare for their departure, but Shirahoshi is hesitant. During the Zou arc, the Blackbeard pirates decimate Baltigo and force the Revolutionary Army out of their hideout. The Marines and the world government learn of this and arrive toward the end, with CP0 clashing with the Blackbeard pirates briefly. The Straw Hats learn of this battle on their way to Whole Cake Island during their mission to save Sanji. During the Whole Cake Island arc, we see Mihawk and Perona read a newspaper detailing either the events of Dressrosa or the events of Baltigo. Meanwhile, Ivankov prepares Kamabaka Queendom for the Revolutionary Army's big meeting after Baltigo is destroyed, and we see Shanks and his red-haired pirates attend a wedding at an undisclosed ruined island. Donsai finally makes it back to Kano and gets married to Baby 5, while we see the Tontada pirates are gifted a ship over in Dressrosa, and Leo, Beyond, and Kabu are recruited to be the Dressrosa security during the Reverie. We would later come to find out that it's during this time that Fujitora, after dropping Doflamingo off at Impel Down, went to visit Vegapunk on Egghead, where he learned of the Seraphim, Vegapunk's new invention to help replace the Warlord system. Fujitora would go on to send a letter to Riku and Cobra to discuss the abolition of the Warlord system. On their way to Wano, the Straw Hat Pirates read the newspaper detailing their attack on the Whole Cake Island. Various characters throughout the world also learn of the Straw Hat Pirates' latest exploit. At an undisclosed location, Crocodile reads this news. Shirahoshi feels a bit more confident after learning of Luffy's victory against Big Mom and Jinbei's allegiance to the Straw Hat Pirates, and is now determined to go to the Reverie. We learn that Beige has successfully escaped Big Mom's territory, and his crew heads towards Thriller Bark so Chiffon can reunite with her sister Lola. He reads the newspaper in anger, learning the majority of the credit for the events of Whole Cake Island being attributed to Luffy. Several royal parties learn of this news as well on their way to the Reverie, such as Dalton and Korea, as well as Vivi and Karoo. The royals of Lucia are attacked by pirates, but are saved with the help of Kobe and Helmeppo. Nearby, Riku and Elizabella's entourages are en route to the Reverie. They read the newspaper detailing the Straw Hats' exploits, and when they're saved from an oncoming torpedo by Kobe, he learns of Luffy's recent victory. Across the New World, the four emperors react to these recent events. Kaido learns of the man who took down Doflamingo. Blackbeard exclaims it's too soon for Luffy to become an emperor, while Shanks suggests that it's time for them to meet soon. Big Mom is angered at Luffy and Morgans for his framing of the situation. Waiting for the meeting of the leaders, the Revolutionary Army read of Luffy's exploits here as well, and close by in Lucia, the citizens are attacked by Peachbeard, an affiliate of the Blackbeard Pirates, while the king of Lucia is away for the Reverie. Luckily, the Revolutionary Army leaders happen to be in the area, and they assist in fending off these invaders, instilling a newfound sense of capability amongst the people of Lucia. The Revolutionary Army leaders presumably head for Kamabaka Queendom to prepare for their attack on the Celestial Dragons, with the Reverie only being 2 days away. On the day before the Reverie, Fujitora completes his trip to Egghead and returns to Marijoa, where he meets Ryokugyu and tells him of Vegapunk's latest invention. Various royals arrive at the Reverie as well, and draw their attention to Neptune, Shirahoshi, and the rest of the royal family of Fishman Island, who had been escorted by Garp himself. Morgans and Attached do coverage of the royals' arrival, which would get printed in a newspaper soon, and we learn that Sabo and the Revolutionary Army have infiltrated Marijoa. Meanwhile, Beige and his crew are unable to make their way to Thriller Bark, as they are prevented from crossing the Red Line due to all the royal ships and their marine escorts occupying the area. As such, they head elsewhere. Back on Marijoa, Vivi, Rebecca, and Shirahoshi all meet each other and share their appreciation of Luffy and the Straw Hats. Leo and Donsai also reunite and discuss their plans to become full-fledged pirates after the Reverie. While the royals are mingling in the courtyard, we get our first introduction to a shadowy figure who would later be known as Imu, the true ruler of the world. It's around this time that Big Mom and Kaido make contact with each other through the transponder snails, allowing the Marines to intercept their call. Big Mom declares that she's heading to Wano in pursuit of Luffy, much to Kaido's annoyance. Back in the courtyard, Shane Charlos attempts to capture Shirahoshi for himself. Sai and Leo spring to action, but are stopped by Lucci and CP0. Luckily, Don Quixote Miosguard saves the princess, explaining that he has a great debt to the royal family of Fishman Island from years ago. Meanwhile, Riku and Cobra meet with Fujitora while Shanks appears before the five elders and wishes to talk to them about a certain pirate. Jewelry Bonnie, under the guise of Queen Dowager Connie of the Sorbet Kingdom, sneaks into Marijoa to save Kuma, who we would later learn is her father. The next day, the Reverie begins while the five elders meet with Imu and await their order. The Straw Hat Pirates, on their way to Wano, receive a newspaper and learn about the arrival of various people at the Reverie, reminiscing about their friends. Sanji and Chopper cut out pictures from the newspaper, preventing the crew from learning about Big Mom and Kaido's contact, which had been detailed on the back. Assuming the coverage of the royals happened the day before this paper was printed, the first day of the Reverie seems to coincide with the Straw Hats' first day on Wano, and as such, the events of Act 1 of Wano take place with Luffy arriving on Wano up through him being defeated by Kaido for the first time. We learned during this day that the Fire Festival and the raid on Onigashima is to take place in 2 weeks. Now, if we take that literally, that'll be 14 days. The next day, Luffy is thrown into Udon Prison, where he meets Eustace Kid, and this being their second day on Wano, Act 1 comes to a close. Meanwhile, sometime between the start of the Reverie and Act 1 and Act 2 of Wano, Beige and his crew arrive at Dressrosa to stock up on supplies, where they come to find out that Lola is actually on the island. While Beige takes down the Germ pirates for causing too much trouble, Lola is taken by some Marines, who we would later learn to be Kujaku and Prince Groose. Gotti chases down Lola, thinking her to be Chiffon, but is defeated by Prince Groose. Gotti is determined and continues his pursuit, attacking a marine ship and then ending up saving Lola. The Fire Tank Pirates realize that this is actually Lola and not Chiffon, allowing the sisters to finally reunite. Over by Greenbit, the newly formed Tontada pirates come across Pound, who had also ended up escaping from Whole Cake Island. Note that Leo, Bian, and Kabu are absent, as they are over in Marijoa as Dressrosa's security detail. They take him to the shore, where they come across Bay, Chiffon, and Lola. After some misunderstanding, they come to realize that this is their father. After reuniting as one big family, they sail away with the Marines chasing after them. Also around this time, Germa 66 made it out of Totoland, but Niji and Yonji were captured. Ichiji and Reiju return to Whole Cake Island to save their brothers when they come across Caesar, who had not been able to make it out of the territory. Together, the five of them overcome Big Mom's children and escape back to Germa 66. Meanwhile, over in Chocolate Town, Kuzan and Augur take this opportunity to abduct Pudding while Big Mom was not around. Back with Germa 66, Caesar and Judge fight over their shared history of being part of Mads, when they come to the realization that their problems all stem from Vegapunk, and together they form Neo-Mads. It's within the first few days of the Reverie that Cobra and Riku make their argument for the abolition of the warlord system, which ultimately would get agreement from the monarchs of the world. As discussed earlier, the first day of the Straw Hats on Wano is likely the first day of the Reverie, and as such, the first 2 days of the Reverie make up Act I of Wano, whereas the third and fourth days of the Reverie are set during the Act II of Wano. On the fourth day of the Reverie, Sabo and the Revolutionary Army declare war on the Celestial Dragons. Fujitora and Ryokugyu fight the Revolutionary Army, but Fujitora ends up helping the Revolutionary Army free slaves, which leads to a fight between Fujitora and Ryokugyu. This allows the Revolutionary Army to move forward with saving Kuma. We learn Lucci has been following Vivi around, who is looking for Garp in order to secure the safety of Shirahoshi. It's around this time that Cobra meets with the five elders, and while looking for the keys to the slaves' chains, Sabo comes across Bonnie, and she entrusts the freeing of Kuma to him and the Revolutionary Army. Bonnie plans to head to Egghead, while Sabo returns to Pangaea Castle to investigate the lost chamber that he recently learned of. Cobra interrogates the elders about the significance of the D and his ancestor Nefertari D. Lily, and he learns about the existence of Emu. The elders and the Emu go to kill Cobra, who is briefly saved by Sabo. We learn the elders have some strange, mysterious powers, and they use them to murder Cobra, framing Sabo in the process. Sabo manages to escape, and the elders realize someone has been eavesdropping on their affairs through a peephole. This turns out to be Wapol, who runs through the castle's walls out of fear for his life. Meanwhile, in the mingling courtyard, St. Charles has returned once again to capture Shirahoshi, though this time bringing Kuma. He is unsuccessful, however, as Morley of the Revolutionary Army arrives and takes Kuma back, while Leo and Don Sai deliver a devastating blow to St. Charles. Back inside Pangaea Castle, Vivi has been captured by CP0, but is freed when Wapol comes crashing through. The two run off, afraid of the world government's actions. Although the Reverie was stated to be a week-long event, it seems this was the final day of the Reverie, likely due to the attack of the Revolutionary Army and the actions of the members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. The various royals begin their return home, while CP0 along with their party members of Alabasta look for Vivi. We learned that while the various monarchs were away at the Reverie, an 8-nation revolution had arisen, including the kingdoms of Lucia, Aigis, and Tajin. Morgans, back at his headquarters, learns of the events of the Reverie and goes to publish these findings, but is stopped by a Cypherpole agent who had been disguised as Attach. Morgans quickly puts him down and continues his affairs when he gets a call from Wapol. We learn Wapol and Vivi have stowed away on Aegis Kingdom's ship and ask for Morgan's help with saving them. Meanwhile, Sabo stows away on the village of the Lucia Kingdom ship, and Bonnie hides on the ship of the Tajin Kingdom. The news of the events of the Reverie spread far and wide, as the next morning we see Mahawk and Perona read the paper. Perona is relieved to see Moria is alive and goes to find him, while Mahawk suggests that leaving is a good idea, as something strange has been discussed at the Reverie, alluding to the abolishment of the warlord system. On Kamabaka Queendom, the Revolutionary Army is shocked that Sabo would murder King Cobra and kidnap Vivi, and are unable to confirm his well-being, as none of the members who attacked Marijoa have yet returned. Sabo's family and friends across the world react similarly, with King Steli being astonished and Makino and the Dadan family devastated. And in Impel Down, Doflamingo observes the panicked world in pure glee. Meanwhile, Moria attacks Fulloled, looking for Absalom, who is revealed to have been killed with his clear fruit being taken by Shiryu. Moria seems to have refused Blackbeard's offers to join his ship and is imprisoned on Fulloled. Blackbeard then starts the journey toward Amazon Lily to prevent the Marines from taking the Love fruit. Across the next few days in Wano, the Straw Hats carry out their various missions in preparation for the raid. Meanwhile, Kid and Luffy show their indomitable spirits through their work in the Udon prison camp. Toward the end of chapter 933, we learn that there are now 9 days left until the raid of Onigashima. It's on this day that CP0 visits Orochi to negotiate an agreement after the fall of Doflamingo, who had been acting as the middleman for the world government, Kaido, and Orochi. Orochi states that he's satisfied with the battleship for the time being, but he requests Dr. Vegapunk himself next time. This is also the day that Big Mom and her crew finally reach Wano, but they're knocked off by the waterfall by King, leading to a temporary memory loss over the course of Act II. Now, the events of the next few chapters make up the 6th and 7th day on Wano, and we learn there are 8 days left until the raid. During the course of these days, Big Mom recovers from her amnesia and confronts Kaido, resulting in the two clashing over the course of a night. We get a montage of the week leading up to the raid across a few chapters, and as the alliance trains and makes final preparations for the oncoming raid on Onigashima. 4 or 5 days before the raid, Big Mom and Kaido announce their temporary alliance, and the following morning, Drake is revealed to be a member of SWORD and informs fellow SWORD member Kobe of Big Mom and Kaido's alliance. Kobe informs Drake that he is currently en route to Amazon Lily to capture Boa Hancock. It's around this time that we get a glimpse of all the remaining warlords being confronted by fleets of marine ships. We see Edward Weevil and Miss Buckins on a certain island surrounded by marines. On Gloom Island, Mihawk is preparing his departure from his residence, where he gets an offer from Crocodile to team up. He accepts the proposal, expressing some excitement for his return to classic piracy. Over on Empty Bluffs Island, Buggy finds his operation surrounded by marine battleships. Terrified for his life, he plots his escape when suddenly the armada starts collapsing. Crocodile and Dawsbones arrives to collect the debt that Buggy had incurred. Unable to repay the debt, Buggy offers Buggy's delivery operation to Crocodile. While combating both the former warlords and the revolutions across the 8 nations, the Marines use this as an opportunity to test out the new Seraphim. Over on Amazon Lily, Yamakaji deploys the Seraphim to capture Boa Hancock. There, S-Snake and S-Hawk easily outmuscle the Kuja tribe. However, Blackbeard arrives with Katarina Devon and Vasco Shot at his side. Seeking the Love Fruit's powers for himself, he makes easy work out of the Marines and invades Amazon Lily. Outside the palace, Kobe offers a diplomatic approach, explaining they simply want to take Hancock into custody, but having been a slave once herself, Hancock refuses the idea of being chained once again. Over on the outskirts of the island, Blackbeard is caught off guard by these new pacifista, and S-Hawk manages to cut off part of the mountain on the island. At the climax of the battle, Hancock petrifies the majority of the Blackbeard pirates, as well as the Marines, before Blackbeard stops her using his Dark Fruit abilities, leaving only the Kuja tribe, Blackbeard, and Kobe conscious. The three come to a stalemate when Rayleigh arrives with Shaki and mediates a resolution to this conflict. Ultimately, the Marines leave the island as well as Blackbeard, having taken Kobe as prisoner. Soon after, taking the Marine back to Vololed, Blackbeard learns of Sword's existence and reveals his plan to create a nation affiliated with the world government. At New Marineford, the top brass discuss the ramifications of the abolition of the warlord system and the potential return of the Rock's pirates with Big Mom and Kaido's alliance. Sakazuki reveals the Marines are stretched far too thin dealing with the revolutions around the world and combating the warlords, while Fujitora sets sail amidst his recovery from fighting the Revolutionary Army and Ryokugyu. Meanwhile, Garp completes his escort of the royal family back to Fishman Island and tells them of the incidents surrounding the Alabasta royalty. Soon after, he sends from Fishman Island and is informed of Big Mom and Kaido's alliance. We as readers learn much more about the Rocks Pirates and the God Valley incident, as well as the current bounties of Emperors of the Sea and Goldie Roger. Back on Wano, the final days before the raid come to an end, and the 9 scabbards march toward Onigashima, bringing Act II to a close. The majority of the events of Act III take place over the course of one day, and result in the defeat of Kaido and Big Mom, thus freeing Wano from Orochi's rule. A lot goes on in terms of action, and there's even what may be the longest flashback in the series, so I think it'll be more fruitful to talk about the world government's affairs during this period, as well as the events that take place after the big battle. For much of Act III, CP0 watches the events of the raid play out and represents the two sides of the conflict using Go pieces. These agents aren't referred to by name until later on in the series and are properly identified in Volume 104's SBS Corner. But real quick, we have Guernica, Joseph, and Maha. Their goal is to ensure that the pirates kill each other and wear out their forces so the world government can come in at the end and take Wano for themselves. Toward the end of the raid, Lucci, Kaku, and Stussy lead a fleet of world government agents toward Wano to ensure that the world government will lay claim to Wano should Kaido actually fall. He instructs the agents in Wano that Nico Robin must be captured no matter what. Maha and Guernica make their way through the battlefield to pursue Robin. They come across Scratchman Apu, who reveals himself to be an informant for Morgans and takes pictures of the agents. Drake and Apu realize their shared enemy and engage in combat with these agents. They put Drake down and Apu escapes, while Joseph instructs them to hurry as the alliance is nearing their victory. Over in Marijoa, the Vive Elders express their concern over the trajectory of the battle in Wano, planning on using this conflict as a cover-up for any inconveniences. An agent stationed outside Wano sees the shadow of Zunisha in the mist, alarming the Elders of the possibility of the Gum Gum Fruit's awakening. Maha and Guernica continue onward with their pursuit of Robin, but are stopped by Izo, who manages to take down Maha. Guernica continues, but is stopped by Drake once again, who attempts to take him out, but Guernica expresses his envy for Drake's freedom to decide his own sense of justice before putting the Marine down a second time. With this, Guernica interferes with Luffy and Kaido's battle, causing Luffy to take a lethal blow, which inadvertently ends up causing him to awaken. Kaido delivers punishment upon Guernica for his interference as the CP0 agent solemnly accepts his fate. The five elders then explain the true name of the Gum Gum fruit and its history across the centuries. Meanwhile, on the outside world, Buggy, Crocodile, and Mohawk form Cross Guild. Buggy's crew accidentally placed Buggy in the top spot of a poster and sent it across the world, suggesting to the world government that he was in charge. This, along with Crocodile attacking the marine ships that were sent after Buggy, suggested to the Marines that he was the mastermind behind the operation, causing them to grant him the status of Emperor after the defeat of Kaido and Big Mom. After Kaido's defeat, Joseph left Onigashima, only to return to the fleet of ships stationed outside. The five elders reconsider their plans, once realizing the nation of Wano would not let down its natural barrier, instructing Joseph to capture Robin. However, their conversation gets interrupted by Ryokugyu, who is on his way toward Wano. Cypherpole is said to have clashed with Big Mom's pirates, and their current whereabouts are unknown. It's suggested that Guernica may still be alive, as he is said to have sent a picture of Gear 5 Luffy to the Marines, while Apu successfully delivered all the details of Wano to Morgans, who winds up printing all this information and declaring Luffy and Buggy as the new emperors. Ryokugyu finally arrives on Wano and attacks, devastating the already defeated crew of Kaido and engaging in a brief fight with Yamato, Momonosuke, and the Scabbards, when Shanks stops him with his overwhelming haki and sends the Admiral on his way. Shanks declines on meeting Luffy as he has to deal with Bartolomeo, who had encroached on his territory weeks prior. He declares it's time for him to claim the One Piece and leaves, but agrees to give Marco a ride back to Sphinx. In New Marineford, Akainu, Kizaru, and Tensei discuss the events of the Reverie and reveal that Alabasta still hasn't left the Red Port, and that the Holy Knights are dealing with Miosgard and the attempted murder of Charlos. They reveal countries around the world believe Sabo's alleged actions have inspired the Eight Nation Revolution, and they are now calling Sabo the Flame Emperor. Sakazuki declares his frustration with the turbulent times he's facing as Fleet Admiral, but vows to defeat anyone who stands in the way of the Marines. Back on Wano, the Straw Hats learn of their new status as an Emperor's crew, and after drawing straws, it's decided that Kid will head toward the direction of Elbaf, Law will head toward the direction of Winter Island, and the Straw Hats, unbeknownst to them, will head toward Egghead. They claim Wano as their territory and under their protection, and make their way on to their next adventure. During the Straw Hats' final days on Wano, Weevil and Miss Buckins arrive at Sphinx, Whitebeard's hometown, to find a group of Marines attacking the unaffiliated country. Weevil drives them off, and Marines call for backup. Ryokugyu arrives and defeats Weevil, capturing the former warlord and leaving the island. Soon after, the Red Hair Pirates drop off Marco at Sphinx, who returns to the aftermath of this battle and learns what happened from Miss Buckins, who is annoyed at Marco's distrust of Weevil having Whitebeard's blood and exclaims that Vegapunk can prove it. Over on Amazon Lily, we see Hancock recovering from her bout with the Marines and Blackbeard alongside Rayleigh and Kujaku as they wonder what the Marines are up to with these new pacifista. Over on Empty Bluffs Island, Mohawk and Crocodile torture Buggy for his incompetence and deceit, but realize Buggy can be used as a scapegoat. Out on the open sea, the Straw Hats learn of the events that transpired on the outside world during their time on Wano and express their concern for both Sabo and Vivi. Now, I should note that this following sequence with Sabo and the Revolutionary Army could take place a few days after the end of the Reverie, placing it somewhere during Act II or Act III of Wano, but it's presented as happening concurrently with the present-day story, so I'll address it here. On Kamabaka Queendom, we find Morley, Karasu, and Lindbergh that have returned with Kuma and the Revolutionary Army, learns that Sabo is safe. At a certain point, Kuma inexplicably teleports himself and heads to scale the Red Line. Meanwhile, Sabo arrives in Lulusia to a crowd of townsfolk ready to apprehend King Seki and Princess Komane. Inspired by Sabo's alleged murder of Cobra and the Revolutionary Army's actions at Marijoa, Lulusia had become part of the Eight Nation Revolution. Sabo takes a ship, and with the new recruits sails outside Lulusia. Lacking a jamming transponder snail, he sets up a remote relay call to trick anyone listening in to think that he was still in Lulusia and makes a call to the Revolutionary Army to relay his information. Meanwhile, in Marijoa, the five elders discuss Sabo's affiliation with so many people with a D, while St. J. Garcia Saturn expresses his desire to handle the situation with Vegapunk and Egghead that York had alerted them of months prior. Emu calls the elders and orders them to use Vegapunk's invention to destroy Lulusia, purely out of its proximity to Marijoa. St. Topman Marcus suggests that this demonstration could influence how they handled the Egghead situation. Back at Kamabaka Queendom, the Revolutionary Army answers Sabo's call, and he begins to inform them of what he saw at Marijoa when the sky above Lulusia turns black and a giant structure appears above the clouds, raining what looks like laser beams down at the country and disrupting Sabo's communication. The elders further discuss the Egghead situation and task CP0 with carrying out Vegapunk's assassination. To ensure the success of this operation, St. J. Garcia Saturn, godhead of science and defense, chose to make a personal visit with an escort by Admiral Kizaru. A few days later, the Straw Hats approach the vicinity of Egghead Island, where they come across Jewelry Bonnie and ultimately end up separated as they arrive on the island. Also approaching Egghead is Lucci, Kaku, and Stussy of CP0, with the Seraphim Esper to assassinate Vegapunk and secure the technology on the island. And with this, the events of the Egghead Island arc begin to unfold, leading up to the Egghead incident. Learning of Straw Hat's involvement with Egghead and Vegapunk, Kizaru orders every battleship nearby to head for Egghead. Morgans is informed by somebody of the world government's plan to assassinate Vegapunk and goes to print a new headline insinuating Straw Hat Luffy kidnapped Vegapunk and is waging war with the government. Much to the disgust of Vivi, who has been taking refuge alongside Wapol at the World Economic Journal's headquarters. As the events on Egghead Island approach their climax, we see a ship flying the Blackbeard Pirates flag approaching. Around this time, many other developments are happening around the world. Kid and his crew arrive on Elbaf to find Shanks' fleet. We learn that Dory, Baroki, Oimo, and Kashi are allies of Shanks, and as Kid prepares to attack the red-haired pirates, Shanks quickly puts down the young pirate and decimates their ship. Law arrives on Winter Island and is met by Blackbeard, who had been waiting for either him, Luffy, or Kid to follow the log post and show up here. Blackbeard, Jesus Burgess, Doc Q, Stronger, and Van Alger engage in combat with the Heart Pirates, and manage to defeat the majority of them and sink their submarine. We learn Pudding is held captive on their ship at this time. In a last-ditch effort, Beppo uses a drug that Chopper had created, allowing Beppo to temporarily go Sulong and escape with Law. On G14, a marine base near Egghead, Tashigi is looking over the kids from Punk Hazard after their treatment from Vegapunk. Vice Admiral Dahl expresses annoyance at Helmeppo for his excessive distress over Kobe's abduction, while he and Habari plead to Prince Groose and Kujaku to help in saving Kobe. Eventually, Garp arrives and tells the Sword members to get on his ship as they're heading to Fololed to free Kobe, though Dahl turns down this offer as she was ordered to head for Egghead by Kizaru. Garp, along with the Sword members and Tashigi, arrive at Fololed and attack the island, being overseen by Shiryu, Pizarro, Wolf, and Vasco Shot. We learn Perona is on the island as well and is seeking to free Moria. After rescuing Kobe, the Marines make their escape when Kuzan confronts them and begins to fight his former mentor, Garp. More recently, we learn Crossguild is becoming even more of a threat to the Marines, as T-Bone has allegedly been killed over Crossguild's bounty system, and while being punished by Mohawk and Crocodile over more of his incompetencies, Buggy announces that he plans on finding the One Piece, much to their annoyance. And finally, Sabo arrives at Kamabaka Queendom with the recruits from Lulusia and gives a report of what happened at Marijoa and on Lulusia to Dragon and Ivankov, causing the Revolutionary Army leaders to speculate about Emu and their ancient weapons. In the present day, we cut back to Marijoa and find that Mio's guard has been executed by Saint Figurlin Garling. And that's a broad overview of where most of the players in the world are at this time. I try not to get too specific with the Straw Hats' actions since they're the most prominent part of the story, but I'll just go back real quick and do a quick refresher of what everyone's doing on Egghead, since it's been kind of a while. Brook, Nami, Zeus, and Sanji are with Edison combating S-Shark, while S-Snake has seemingly destroyed Pythagoras and petrified Usopp, Lilith, and half of Frankie. Jinbei and Stussy are moving through Building B's second floor, while Robin, Chopper, and Atlas are heading toward an unused part of the lab. Luffy and Lucci are fighting against S-Bear, while Zoro and Kaku are chasing down S-Hawk. Finally, Vegapunk himself is held captive by York, who just shot Shaka, while Bonnie is in the ballroom looking through Kuma's memories. Oh, okay. A lot happened in the last 200 or so chapters of One Piece, and there's a lot of story threads that are left to wrap up. You know, what's going to happen to Kid and Law? Where's Smoker? Which Blackbeard pirates are heading toward Egghead? If through elimination, it seems like it's going to be Katarina, Devon, and Lafitte, but I guess we'll see. Where are the Marines on Egghead? They've been on their way for quite a while. Not only that, Emu's still a shadow. What's up with the Five Elders? Where's X-Drake? He's knocked out conscious at the end of Wano, but we haven't seen him since. Just a lot of stuff going on. Also, Moria and Perona are on Fololed as well, so they'll be coming back into the story at some point. What's the Mother Frame or Mother Flame or whatever you call it? What's going to happen with Vivi? Is she going to reunite with the Straw Hats? Is Morgan's going to come to Egghead? Caribou's on Egghead too. That's another thing. Who's Morgan's informant? There's just so much that's going to happen. So many unresolved questions. And I can't wait to get back into the manga once it returns in a couple of days. If you're still watching at this point, I want to say thank you again. Thanks for all the support over the past few weeks. We've hit over 3,000 views on the first video, and we're a little over 50 subscribers, I think, right now. So that's awesome. Way beyond my imaginations, like I said. Thanks for watching, and I'd really appreciate it if you drop a subscribe here. And I hope to see you in a few days when the chapter drops, chapter 1067. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.